Welcome to Our Love podcast, where we share insights from top scientists and relationship experts on all things about love that are out of the box, refreshing, and new. Now sit back, grab a cold drink or hot one if you prefer, and enjoy today's episode.
Hi, Jim. So great to have you.
It's great to be here.
I'm really looking forward to talking today. Today, we're supposed to focus our time on the love scale of physical connection. And I'm hoping we can use both your research and your clinical practice to help our listeners understand what is physical connection, why is it important, how do we use it in our relationships. I'm really excited to talk about your research, in particular, your research around handholding. But before we get to that, can we start with just a working definition of what physical connection is? Because I think when people hear physical connection, they think sexual intercourse or whatever goes on, in our bedroom behind closed doors. And I'm wondering if we can start with just a definition of physical connection.
Well, I mean, believe it or not, it's a little bit harder than it sounds because physical connection is really about your body touching my body physically, but what does that mean physically? We can intuit my skin touching your skin. But in fact, when I say certain things to you, it has an immediate physiological effect on your body. Is that a physical connection? I think what we should do for the purposes of most of today's conversation is focus on the more intuitive connection. What we're really talking about here is my body touching your body. I mean, in the abstract.
Well, and since we're on Zoom, I don't know how close can you get, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you mean you're suggesting that we really keep it to physical connection, but you're also suggesting that there are other ways people could connect physically. I sing a beautiful song. My partner's in the other room. He's physically activated for some reason.
And that's right.
Yeah.
No question. And in fact, if your partner is a robust singer, you might be able to hear your partner's voice, to feel it in your sternum when they're singing loud enough. That's just a more exaggerated version of what happens in our ears. And that movement of air, that push of air, we reach out and touch each other in that way.
Yeah. And it so explains why music touches us, right? People have different kinds of music that they really, really like and other music that they really, really don't like. Okay. So physical touch. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to play a little game with me to see if you and I together can come up with 10 really specific examples of physical touch, just to give our listeners an idea of it's not just sex or sexual intercourse. I thought maybe we could go back and forth, try to come up with 10 different ideas. I'll start with one, you'll go to two, then you get the last word.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to give you the one that I think you deserve because it's the one you've researched a lot about. So I won't start with that one. I'm going to give that one to you. I'll start with physical touch through sexual intercourse.
Okay. So we're just listing them?
We're just listing. I'm going to keep a tally. We're at one.
Okay. Well, we could say hugging.
Okay. I'm going to say wrestling.
Wrestling?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say kissing.
Okay. I'm going to say tickling.
I'm going to say handshake.
All right. I'll say lap sitting.
How about high-fiving?
Ooh, I like that. All right. How close were we? Are we 2 away? I think we might be 2 away. Cuddling.
Cuddling. And then I think this is what you were referring to. I'm going to say handholding.
Yeah, that one is yours. That one is definitely, you're very
It's all of ours. It's everyone's.
But decades of research on that. Yeah. So again, I just want our listeners to be thinking about physical connection, not just meaning intercourse. There could be tickling or touching or back rubbing or hand holding or high fiving. And opening up the ability to see all of those things, I think makes it a little bit more accessible, right? You can hand hold anywhere.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even, a colleague of mine at Yale named Michael Krauss has studied how professional sports team players swat each other's butts.
Yeah.
And it matters to their team performance.
Really? What's the outcome?
So the teams that swat each other do better. You know what? If you want a good relationship, you need to swat each other's butts. That is bad advice because some people are really going to not like that.
Absolutely.
But if you do like it, then by all means, have at it. You are intimate partners. There are lots of ways for you to express physical affection with each other. And even if it's not something traditionally considered, affectionate, like high-fiving, touching, there's just so many ways to do it. And as what I think we'll talk about in a second, it's really important for your well-being and for the well-being of your relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So in preparation for us talking, and thank you for that clarification, because I think part of what you're suggesting is that there's communication involved in this touching. And without communication, you can get yourself into some really, really deep, dark waters with someone, right? Someone who doesn't want their neck touched, or someone that doesn't want their butt slapped, or somebody that doesn't want lots of hugging, or maybe it's the kissing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in preparation for today, I did a very informal research project, nothing like the research that you do, but I polled 10 friends, very small sample size. Some of them are colleagues. And I told them a little bit about you and that we were talking. And I asked them, what would you like for me to ask Jim? And the number one question was, what do I do if my need for touch and physical connection is different than my partner's?
Mm. Yeah, this is very common. And it is not a catastrophe. It is, as you say, all about communication. A similar question I get asked is, do people who are avoidantly attached, or people who are introverts, do they dislike touch? And the answer is no. They might like it at a different frequency or in a different way or at different times, but almost everyone, barring some significant issues, needs touch. And often, as we've learned during this pandemic that we've all been going through, they crave it. There's a term called touch hunger, the skin hunger, that the skin really, most of us need some touch sometime. And it's not just any touch either. We need skin. We need human skin to touch our human skin.
Yeah.
And it's easy to make jokes about it, or it's easy to trivialize it in other ways, especially in our culture. But it is not trivial at all. Babies will not develop cognitively if they don't get this. They will, but they won't develop as well cognitively if they don't get skin-on-skin touch. One of the things that we've been steadily learning over the decades since I started is that, our adult relationships, our love relationships, are often, in many ways, analogs of those relationships we had with our caregivers when we were little people. Yep. And I think touch is one of them. I think that there are family cultures that either devalue touch or neglected touch, and other cultures where touching is, and others like the one I grew up in, where touching is just so ubiquitous you don't even notice that it's occurring.
Yeah.
And we all have to navigate those, just like any other thing that we might have to be navigating.
So
in
when
a
working,
relationship.
yeah. So when working with a couple, the mismatch on touch, you might treat as the same mismatch in kind of any other area where there's a mismatch.
I mean, right,
Religious
exactly. There
views,
might be
spiritual practices, how much they
yes,
want to exercise.
yes,
Yeah.
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 I mean, sex comes up like that all the time
Yeah.
for couples.
Well, that's the second question. Can I ask it?
Sure.
So the second most popular question was, and you can probably anticipate this. What if my partner and I used to be physically close and had lots of great sex back in the day? After X number of years of marriage, we barely even kiss anymore. What's your advice on how we can repair that?
Well, there's a lot of advice about how you can repair that. One of the things, funny, I just talked yesterday for this podcast with Arthur Aaron at University at SUNY Stony Brook about what characterizes relationships that have been together for a long time. Believe it or not, these unicorns do exist out there. Couples that have been together for a long time and still report and in fact show physiological evidence of being passionately in love. What's going on with them? And one of the things that we find is that they are committed to exploring new things together. So if you are in a rut, one of the things that you might want to consider is exploring new things together. And of course, you fold in, everything from Esther Perel's advice on, newness and freshness and experience to Sue Johnson's advice on emotional safety and closeness. You can't have those shared experiences without working on your safety together emotionally. And so I think that even if we're just talking about hugs and kisses in the kitchen, after work, to say nothing of what happens in the bedroom later, if things have grown a little cold and stale, what people need to do is have the courage together to try stuff. And of course, like I said, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. That is going to require that emotional safety with each other to make a suggestion. This could be, by the way, as simple as one of the John Gottman, John and Julie Gottman recommendations of was it the 30-second kiss?
Yeah.
Maybe you come home, stand in the kitchen, you're like, I'm tired. I have to cook for everybody. This is miserable, but we've committed to the 30-second kiss. The tricky thing about that is that sometimes one or the other just really isn't as interested in that. But the data suggests that a 30-second kiss could turn up the temperature a little bit later on.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, the skill of communication, and then also using this idea that there are lots of different kinds of physical touch that you could experiment with, be curious about, spend time working on together. And that may then lead to changes in the bedroom. Absolutely.
Yeah. What if you commit to sitting right next to each other, like you're, this is funny to say, but as if you're passionately in love. Faking it till you're making it, maybe. Yeah. But whenever you watch a movie or watch TV or sit and listen to the radio, or whatever it is, there are lots of ways that you can sort of hack this. And it sounds silly, but it's really not. We often experience our lives after engaging in our lives. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've learned from brain research is that almost the last thing we experience, the last thing our brain does is serve up a conscious experience of what's going on.
Right.
So we can say, well, there's a rule. The rule is we have to be physically touching when we're doing this activity. And at first you're like, okay, this is corny. But once that becomes a habit, then you are finding yourselves physically touching more often.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I will share with you that my partner and I did the 30-second kissing for a little while in sort of those early child rearing years. Where for me, as a nursing mom, I was getting a lot of touching.
Yes.
And so there was a mismatch, right? I was like, oh, I've been touched all day.
Yeah.
My partner was not getting the same amount of level of touching. So we instituted the 30-second kiss, and there was so much laughing at the beginning, which was beautiful. And we used that. And I sometimes think that quality time and touching and humor and laughter can all really build that sense of safety you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that safety, I can't emphasize enough that safety, that feeling that whatever we're doing, everybody's open to it and everybody's okay with making a blunder of some kind, is super, super important, because that will open up those spaces where you can laugh together.
Yeah. Yeah. You've spent, I think, decades studying couples in the lab. When was your first sort of lab research study? What year?
Oh God. Well, I was first doing research with John Gottman in the 1990s, the early 19. Well, I started in 1990, in fact. And I worked with him until 1996, and spent a fair amount of that time as his sort of laboratory coordinator. So I ran the newlywed study, and I coded the domestic violence study and the apartment lab study. I did all of that stuff. And we worked on the SPAF, which is the specific affect coding system, together. And for that research, we would bring couples into the laboratory, as is widely known, and we'd goad them into fighting, which is extremely easy. There's just nothing to it.
I have the same experience in my clinical practice, right? Couple makes an appointment, they come in. It's pretty easy to get going. Yeah. I don't have to pour much gasoline on the fire most of the time.
Couple quick questions, nothing to it.
Yeah. So, so I'm just so impressed. So you spent so long studying this. And I read a quote somewhere, I don't think it came from you, but it was, love is both art and science. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts about that. And that maybe can help us sort of lead into your hand-holding study that I'm so excited to hear about.
Well, I would add a bit to that quote. I would modify it a little bit, and I would say that science is both art and science.
Yes.
The thing is, all of the things that we do, whether it's engage in a love relationship with our partner, or design experiments, or write a novel, all of these things are creative activities. And I think that it really helps to view them that way. What can we create? What can we create together? How do we go about creating it? What kind of new stuff can we try? And how can we share the experience of that stuff?
In that way, again, I hear the communication, but there's also intention.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many couples, at least the ones that I often see in my office, sort of, there's not a lot of intention. They just sort of, fell in love, maybe had that really lustful honeymoon phase. And then there were the kids and then whatever, but there wasn't a lot of intention along the way. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of, therapists talk about make sure you're having date nights during the child rearing years with your partner. Like that's a way to set intentions around the relationship. So I hear you kind of talking about being aware of and maybe increasing communication, and also being aware of and increasing intentions to create something together.
Intentions to create, and also a commitment to create. I mean, the thing is, these are the more mundane aspects of relationship in some sense. We have a culture that often expects us to be swept off our feet with perfect love, and you're either in love or you're not in love. And if you're
That's
in
what the
love, then
movies.
everything
That's
works
what the
out.
movies say.
That's right. And the movies are, you can quote me on this, quote Our Love company. The movies are bullshit.
Agreed.
They are to adopt that understanding of adult love is to ensure misery going on and on, because one way or another, as any marital therapist in the world knows, one way or another, whether no matter how your relationship started, one way or another, you come up against this period where you have to start deciding. You have to start deciding what you're going to do.
Yeah.
How you're going to do it.
Yeah.
You have to start structuring things a little bit. Maybe you have kids. Maybe there's a move that you have to make. Maybe there's financial hardship. Maybe you're just bored.
Yeah.
And, you know, we think things like, well, we're not supposed to be bored if we're really in love. But, you know, you can get bored. The question is, can you talk about it and then creatively solve that problem? And this, to me, gets us back to the beginning of our conversation about, you know, what if, you know, that question from your therapist friends, you know, what if one person doesn't like to touch and the other person does? Well, there's a problem that you have to creatively figure out how to explore and solve. And I think what you mean by intention is a good faith effort to like really try and make this, figure out a thing that will work for everybody.
Yeah. 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 The Van Lab. Are you doing now, as the director of the Van Lab, similar research that you've done in the past?
No, well, I mean, sort of. We're still studying relationships, but, you know, towards the end of the time that I was working in John Gottman's lab, because I still keep in touch with him all the time, and he and Julie and I talk about things, and it's great fun. But you know, right about that time in 1995, 1996, there was this thing that John actually told me about. It was called magnetic resonance imaging. It was this way to look at inside the brain and take pictures of it while it was doing stuff. And that it took hold of me. And at that time, those kinds of things weren't really available many places, including where I wound up going to grad school. Against everybody's prediction, I went to the University of Arizona to work with a guy named John Allen. And John was not studying relationships at all. But he was really open to me, you know, training me, you know, in the brain, the physiology of the brain, the structure of the brain, the function of the brain. And I spent, you know, a good decade doing that with him, and then going on to my postdoc with Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And all the time, though, the whole time, sort of in my back pocket was this simmering plan to get back to couples. Because what I wanted to do with couples is what John Gottman had done with couples, which was merge the study of autonomic physiology with couple communication.
Right.
I wanted to do that with the brain.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the brain guy.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard. It's a lot easier to measure, you know, autonomic physiology like heart rate and stuff.
Yeah. You get a pulse oximeter for $15 and you're done.
Well, yeah, that's right. And for brain imaging, you have to stick a whole body in a little tube that they barely fit into.
Yeah.
Put a thing over their face, and subject them to very, very loud noises in an uncomfortable, you know, situation for a long time. And as you can imagine, this is not that conducive to marital communication.
Right.
So along the way, doing my clinical work, I was so lucky. I was able to spend a good year working with 2 era veterans who were having late onset PTSD, often related to neural deterioration and inhibitory circuits in their prefrontal cortex. Stop me if I'm getting jargony, because I sometimes can lapse into that.
Nope, you're good so far.
But there was one fellow who came in who, had experienced just a trauma on the level that I can't, when I finally learned about it, it was hard for me to even fathom. It still is hard for me to fathom anyone going through this.
Yeah.
But the point is, I had achieved a lot of success by doing exposure therapy, PTSD-based exposure therapy, and progressive relaxation techniques, and he wouldn't do any of them. As long as he had these terrible symptoms, he had to come in. But as long as there was the possibility that he would have to talk about what had happened, he would just completely shut down.
Yeah.
And at some point, he asked if he could come in with his wife. And I said, sure, why not? And she came in, and we tried again to get to the point where we could maybe start talking about some of his traumatic experiences in the war. And he started freezing, and she reached over and she clasped his hand.
Mm.
And suddenly he started to bawl and shake and tell the story.
Wow.
And the thing is, I learned as you know, when you do clinical work, you learn things on the spot with experiences with people that often there's no research for.
Yeah.
So you have like an existence proof or a case that alerts you to something. And one of the things that I learned was that hand-holding was doing something more than calming him down, because he didn't calm down at all.
Yeah.
He became hugely expressive and deeply, almost violently racked with pain and sobs because of the hand-holding. So what was the hand-holding doing? I wanted to find that out.
Yeah.
So I did what anybody would do, and I designed an fMRI study to see if we could get to the bottom of it.
I'm not sure that's what anyone would do, but thank goodness you did it, Jim, because I think the research is fascinating.
Oh, thank you. One of the things we've learned since then is, we've done dozens of these studies now, and it is really clear that physical touch is changing the way that our brain processes information about the world.
Yeah.
One way that can manifest is that physical touch can soothe us and make us feel better. And that's great. That's definitely one thing that it can do. But that's what everybody thinks of when they think of hand-holding. But it does way more than that. It opens up new vistas by giving us courage to experience fear at a greater level, to experience stress at a more of a higher intensity. When we're with other people that we're close to, our perception of ourself is enlarged to include the resources that they have, as well as the resources that we have.
Right.
And that's true no matter what. If we can be told that our close loved one is in the other room, and we'll get a little bit of that effect. They're standing right next to us, it'll help. They're sitting next to us, it'll help. But there is nothing that we can do that's less ambiguous, that's more clear than physical touch.
Yeah. Wow.
And so the brain, it's special. That physical touch, we now know, as of just 2 years ago, we now know that the physical touch actually has analgesic effects. It works like a painkiller. And it does that on a system of the brain called the neurologic pain signature that no psychological interventions have ever been shown to have an effect on.
So you have subjects in the lab, and you somehow I don't know, inflict pain and put their hand in a bucket of water.
We either shock them or we hit them with a hot thermode, and then we shock their partner, and we're going to shock you pretty soon. The thing is, if we want to know how the brain is processing these trials that we all will go through in life, then we have to see the brain going through those trials, and that's why we do that stuff. So in this study, we had a hot thermode attached to their arm, and it ramps up quickly. So people feel like they're getting burned, but they're not really getting burned.
Yeah.
And this causes activation in a very specific region of the brain that's been studied intensely by a guy named Tor Wager at Dartmouth University. And that region, that pain processing system, like I said, it is impervious to psychological interventions of any kind, and he's been studying the heck out of this.
Right.
But handholding did it.
Wow.
So touch it occupies some strange space that we haven't really delineated yet in our science that is in between or overlapping the psychological and the physiological.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about it, there's almost a magical aspect to it. But it's not. The research you're doing is proving that it's not magic. There is science behind skin to skin contact with a partner and what effects that can have on your brain. And you and your lab partners, you're getting to see that in real time on the brain scans.
Yeah.
So
while it's happening. Yeah. It's really extraordinary. And you can see it sometimes even in single individuals. We had a reporter from NPR News, Barbara Bradley Haggerty, come and visit the lab. And she visited not with her romantic partner, because we said, come down with someone that you trust the most. And she came down with her close friend of decades, a person that she had they had both been through cancer together, and they had suffered together, and that creates incredible bonds.
Yes.
And this person holding Barb's hand in the scanner, we were able to see in a single individual, which is not so easy to do, decreased activation in a region of the brain called the hypothalamus,
right,
which our listeners may be interested to know is responsible for the release of hormones into your bloodstream that in the short term give you lots of extra power to deal with a stressor, but in the long term make you sick.
Right.
And so if you can decrease activation in the hypothalamus when you're under stress, chances are you're going to be more able to fight off infections. Your wounds will heal more quickly. You'll grow hair more quickly. You'll just be healthier. Yeah. And the touch of someone that you trust can help you get there.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And it's in some ways such a simple thing that we could all do in our relationships. But when you describe it, it has this huge, can have this huge impact. Not only, I would guess, on yourself, but also on your partner. And then the two people, if we're looking at it as a twosome in a partnership, right? As on the couple.
Yeah, that's right. Some people, my friend and fellow researcher David Sabara likes to talk about how these processes are hidden. They're hidden regulators. And I want to say a little bit about what that means. Because a hidden regulator, you and your partner are hidden regulators for each other.
Right.
Meaning that you don't really know how much you're affecting each other until you need it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you find out. But the truth is that you're building that regulatory capacity all the time. And then one of you's in the hospital with something serious. Maybe there's pain. Maybe you're having a hard time getting your blood pressure down.
Yeah.
And that touch will suddenly, you'll see it make a huge difference. And I can say this now because, we have the studies, but we also have just gazillions of anecdotes. Once we started doing these studies, I started hearing from nurses and physicians, all over the world, giving me these anecdotes of particularly blood pressure, but, pain, fear. Anyone who's had kids knows that, they want to sit on your lap. Sometimes they'll get more afraid because now they're safe to have that fear. But that's okay. That means that they're gonna learn the value of courage because of your support.
Right. Right. You have a quote in one of your writings: "We are each other's habitat."
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We are each other's habitat.
You
you have anything more you want to say about that?
Yeah. Well, so this grew out of a real dilemma for me. So when I did my first handholding study, we thought we were going to find the neural mechanism that took handholding and transformed it into less of a threat response. And we knew that was going to be the prefrontal cortex, because the prefrontal cortex is how we regulate our emotions. If you tell yourself, this is only a movie that I'm watching, that's not real blood, that's fake blood. You're using your prefrontal cortex to tell yourself a story in order to talk your sensory experience out of believing that what you're seeing is real.
Right.
That's incredible for one thing. That's a human thing. Other critters cannot do that.
Right.
But nobody had ever done one of these handholding studies before, and I wanted to get published in Science. So I thought, well, I'm going to show that you're going to touch hands, and it's going to increase activity in your prefrontal cortex, and that's going to decrease activity in your threat response, and then I'm going to get so famous. And that didn't happen at all. Instead, the prefrontal cortex got really quiet. It was like magic. It was like the hand of God just came in and went, no more threat response.
Right. Turn off.
Caused me a bit of a crisis, although we did get some news media. But my mom, called me up after our first handholding study wound up in the New York Times, and she said, "This is how you get into the New York Times?" By telling people that handholding makes you less stressed out when you're going to get threatened. She's like, "You should have called me, because I could have saved you so much time." And what she was implicitly saying is, this isn't interesting unless you know why or what's going on. And all of this is a long way of saying that this got me thinking about, well, what is the human habitat? What is the baseline for a human that a human brain expects to find when it wakes up in the morning and when it bursts forth out of the void as a little person? And, if you look at a salamander, a salamander's habitat is a cool, damp, dark environment with bugs around to eat. And if it doesn't have that environment, it freaks out. And what I mean by freaking out is that it has a stress response, and the stress response is designed to get it back into that environment. Well, handholding is not adding a bit of emotion regulation, like telling ourselves it's only a movie. Handholding is going back to our environment.
Yeah.
Getting back to our habitat.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't see that prefrontal activation. It's because there's nothing to react to.
Yeah. Oh, so much more to talk about. I'd love for us, if we get a chance to get together again, to talk about how that's related to the parent-child relationship. So many more questions for you about the research moving forward at the Van Lab. Maybe you'll come back and we'll get a chance to talk again. But before we end, anything else you want to share? You want to share where people can find you if they're curious?
Well, sure. You can just Google Jim Coan or James Coan and you'll find me. But the thing that I really want to say is, in the time that we've been through this pandemic, a lot of us have not been able to touch the people that we love most or be in physical proximity to them. And one of the questions that I've been getting from a lot of news media over the years, the last 2 years, is, well, what do we do now? We you're the touch guy. Now we can't touch. We're doomed, right? And at first I was like, yeah, we're doomed. Shit. And then I started really digging into the literature on what people do all over the world in every culture when they are stressed, when they experience famine, natural disasters, etc. And touching is a big part of it. But so is something that the anthropologists dryly call coordinated movement, dancing together. So that is really big. But the other thing is singing. And I had this experience with a reporter from the New Yorker magazine. She called up and in our conversation, she told me just how sad she was being alone in her apartment for weeks.
Mm.
And I thought, I should sing her a song. And I said, do you want me to sing you a song? And she said, are you kidding right now? Are you serious? I said, yeah, I'm going to sing you a little song. And here's the song. Ready? I'm going to sing it to you. So quick. My daughter taught it to me. Ah, poor bird, take thy flight high above the sorrow of this sad night.
Mm.
And this reporter got really emotional.
Mm.
And she said, oh my God, I had no idea how much I needed that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing is asking my students in large classes that I'm teaching, even over Zoom, to sing to each other.
Oh,
like this.
I love it. I love it. A way of touching without the actual physical touch.
Right.
Because I have a physiological response to hearing your voice.
Yeah.
Hearing you sing in particular.
And, Sue Johnson helped me figure out how this works. This works because I take a chance with you by doing something vulnerable.
Mm.
Reaching out and touching someone is taking such a chance.
Yes.
You're going to reach out and touch your skin to their skin. You're going to sing, even though you have a bad voice, right?
Yeah.
You're going to maybe write a poem. You're going to do something that makes your heart vulnerable to them.
Yeah.
They respond, which they almost always will do. They respond with, oh my God, I love that.
Mm.
And you are built up. You're getting some of that nourishment that you need through that combination of vulnerability and acceptance.
That's beautiful. So reach out and touch someone and reach out and sing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jim. This has been so delightful. I really mean it. I hope we can do this again and find some more time to learn more about your research and talk more about these experiences. I appreciate
Me too. Yeah. Thanks for your great questions.
Great to see you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Our Love podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's topic. Please be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and give us a 5-star rating to help others find us. We'll see you again next week, and we hope that you are experiencing your best love today.